Atomic Habits by James Clear. This video is made for educational purposes only. This book is about how tiny, daily habits can create big changes over time. It explores the power of small actions and how they can shape our lives in unexpected ways. The core message is that by making small, consistent changes, we can achieve great results. It's a guide to building better habits and breaking bad ones through simple, practical strategies. James Clear starts by explaining what an atomic habit is. He says it's not a big change, but a tiny, simple action that adds up over time. He uses the example of a person who wants to get healthier. Instead of trying to run a marathon right away, they start by walking for just 5 minutes every day. That small action becomes a habit, and over time, it changes their whole life. He talks about how habits are like tiny seeds. If you plant them in the right soil, like a consistent routine, they grow into big results. But if you don't take care of them, they can fade away. He reminds the listener that it's not about being perfect, but about showing up every day, even if it's just a little. He also mentions that habits are not just about what you do, but how you do it. For example, if you want to read more, you might start by reading just 1 page every night. That small step helps you build the habit without feeling overwhelmed. James Clear also talks about how habits are like compound interest. They grow over time, and the earlier you start, the more powerful they become. He encourages the listener to think about what small actions they can take today that will add up to big changes in the future. James Clear had a big story to tell, and it started with an accident. He was hit in the face with a baseball bat during high school. The bat slipped from his classmate's hands and hit James so hard that it broke his nose, cracked his skull, and damaged his eyes. He lost consciousness, couldn't remember basic things like the year or the president, and ended up in the hospital. He was in a coma for a while, and when he woke up, he had serious injuries, including a bulging eye. It took months to recover, and he couldn't even drive for 8 months. He tried to get back to baseball but was cut from the team. He felt lost and defeated. But then he went to college. At Denison University, he started making small changes in his life. He got better sleep, kept his room clean, and studied hard. These tiny habits helped him feel in control again. Over time, he built more habits like lifting weights and eating better. These small actions added up. By his senior year, he was a team captain, got academic honors, and even made the ESPN Academic All-America team. He didn't expect to do so well, but the small, consistent habits he built made a huge difference. James Clear had a lot of big ideas about habits, but he didn't start with a plan. He just kept doing small things, one after another. Over time, those little actions added up and made a huge difference. He didn't become successful overnight. He just kept showing up, even when it was hard. That's how he got better at everything: sports, school, writing, and life. He didn't know it then, but he was building a pattern that would carry him through years of challenges. Later, he started writing online, sharing what he learned about habits. He wrote every Monday and Thursday, and that simple habit helped him grow a big email list. More people started reading his work, and soon he was speaking at big companies and writing a book. He didn't expect to be an expert, but he became one because he kept showing up and learning. He's not saying he's perfect, just that he's learned a lot by living what he writes. He wants to help others do the same. He believes that small, consistent actions can change your life. He's not telling people what to do, just sharing what he's learned through his own journey. He hopes this book can help others find their own path to success. James Clear had a lot of big ideas about habits, but he didn't start with a plan. He just kept doing small things, one after another. Over time, those little actions added up and made a huge difference. He didn't become successful overnight. He just kept showing up, even when it was hard. That's how he got better at everything: sports, school, writing, and life. He didn't know it then, but he was building a pattern that would carry him through years of challenges. Later, he started writing online, sharing what he learned about habits. He wrote every Monday and Thursday, and that simple habit helped him grow a big email list. More people started reading his work, and soon he was speaking at big companies and writing a book. He didn't expect to be an expert, but he became one because he kept showing up and learning. He's not saying he's perfect, just that he's learned a lot by living what he writes. He wants to help others do the same. He believes that small, consistent actions can change your life. He's not telling people what to do, just sharing what he's learned through his own journey. He hopes this book can help others find their own path to success. Now, let's talk about British cycling. In 2003, the team was really bad. For almost 100 years, British cyclists had won very few medals. They were even laughed at. But then Dave Brailsford came in. He didn't try to make big changes right away. Instead, he looked for tiny improvements everywhere. He changed bike seats, made tires grip better, and even painted the inside of the team truck white so they could see dust. All these small changes added up. In just a few years, British cyclists started winning big. They won Olympic gold, set world records, and even won the Tour de France. How did they do it? It was because of all the small things they did every day. So here's the thing. People often think success happens because of big goals. But James Clear realized that's not really how it works. He saw that the British cycling team didn't just suddenly become great. They made tiny changes, every day for a long time. Those small things added up and helped them win big. Then he thought about his own life. He tried setting goals all the time, like getting better grades or making more money. But he kept failing. He realized that goals don't really help you change. What matters is the system you build. A system is like the steps you take every day that lead to your goals. He explained that goals are about the result you want. Systems are about how you get there. If you're a coach, your goal is to win, but your system is how you train and manage your team. If you're an entrepreneur, your goal is to build a business, but your system is how you work and grow it. Goals can be helpful, but they're not enough. They can make you feel like you're waiting for happiness or success. But if you focus on your system, you can be happy and improving every day. Systems help you keep going, even when things get hard. The most important thing is to build good habits. These small, consistent actions add up and create big results. They're like the building blocks of success. And the best part? You don't need to wait for big goals. Just start with small daily actions. So, here's the thing. You can change your habits, but it's not easy. You might try really hard, and for a little while, you do better. But then, you slip back. Why? Because changing your habits is more than just doing something new. It's about changing who you believe you are. James Clear talks about 3 levels of change. The first is about results, like losing weight or getting promoted. That's what most people focus on. The second is about the process, like working out or writing every day. That's where habits come in. But the deepest level is about identity. That's who you think you are. If you believe you're a lazy person, you'll act like it. If you believe you're a hard worker, you'll do the work. The key is to shift from outcome-based habits to identity-based ones. Let me explain. Imagine 2 people trying to quit smoking. One says, "I'm trying to quit." The other says, "I'm not a smoker." The second person has changed their identity. They don't see themselves as someone who smokes anymore. This is how it works. When you start doing something every day, like exercising or reading, you start to believe you're the kind of person who does those things. Over time, that becomes part of who you are. You don't have to force yourself anymore. You just do it because it's who you are now. Brian Clark, an entrepreneur, had a habit of chewing his nails. He tried to stop by just telling himself he wanted to. It didn't work. But when he started paying for manicures, he felt proud of his nails. He began to see himself as someone who takes care of his appearance. That's when the habit stuck. So, the real power of habits is that they shape your identity. When your habits align with who you are, you don't need to fight to keep them. You just do them naturally. That's how you make lasting change. So, here's the deal. The real magic of habits isn't about big changes or perfect results. It's about small, everyday actions that slowly show you're becoming someone new. You don't have to be perfect. You just need to vote for the kind of person you want to be more than the kind of person you used to be. Imagine you want to be a writer. Every time you write a page, you're proving to yourself that you are a writer. Every time you read a book, you're proving you're a reader. It's not about the outcome, like finishing a novel, it's about the process. The more you act like the person you want to be, the more you start to believe it. That's how identity works. You start by deciding who you want to be. Then you act like that person, even if it's just a little. Over time, those small actions add up. You start to feel like that person. You start to trust yourself more. You start to believe you can actually do the things you want to do. This is why habits are so powerful. They don't just change your life, they change who you think you are. And that's the real reason they matter. So, here's a story about how habits really work. A long time ago, in 1898, a psychologist named Edward Thorndike did an experiment with cats. He put them in boxes and watched how they learned to escape. The cats would poke around, try things, and eventually find the right button to press to get out and get food. Over time, they got faster and faster at escaping. Thorndike noticed that the cats were learning from their mistakes and repeating what worked. This shows us how our brains work. When we face a problem, we try different things until we find what works. That's called trial and error. The first time we try something, it takes a lot of thinking. But after a few tries, our brain starts to remember what worked and does it automatically. That's a habit forming. Our brain is always looking for ways to save energy. It wants to do things without thinking. So when we repeat a behavior, it becomes easier and easier. Habits are like shortcuts. They help us save time and mental space so we can focus on bigger things. Some people worry that habits make life boring. But that's not true. Habits actually give us freedom. When we have good habits for things like eating, sleeping, and working, we don't have to think about them every day. That frees up our mind to be creative and do other important things. Now, the science of habits breaks it down into 4 steps: cue, craving, response, and reward. A cue is something that makes you want to do something. Craving is the desire for the reward. The response is the action you take. And the reward is the good feeling that comes after. This loop happens all the time, even when you're not thinking about it. So, here's how habits really work. When you wake up in the morning, that's your cue. You want to feel alert? That's your craving. You drink coffee? That's your response. And then you feel better? That's your reward. Over time, your brain connects waking up with drinking coffee. Now, when you see a donut shop on the way to work, that's your cue. You start to crave a donut. You buy one, that's your response. And then you feel satisfied. Your brain now links that donut shop with eating a donut. When you're stuck at work, that's your cue. You feel frustrated, that's your craving. You check your phone for a break, that's your response. And then you feel better. Your brain now links being stuck with checking social media. When you walk into a dark room, that's your cue. You want to see? That's your craving. You flip the light switch? That's your response. And then you see? That's your reward. Your brain now links dark rooms with turning on the light. By the time we're adults, we don't even notice these things. We tie our shoes the same way every morning, or turn off the toaster after using it. These are just habits we've learned over time. So, Here's a story about how our brains learn to spot the important things without us even realizing it. There was a woman who worked as a paramedic, and she saw her father-in-law at a family gathering. She looked at him and said, "I don't like the way you look." He laughed and said, "Well, I don't like your looks either." But she was serious. She knew something was wrong. A few hours later, he was rushed to the hospital because he had a serious heart problem. She had noticed something in his face that others didn't. She couldn't explain it, but her brain had picked up on a pattern she had seen many times before. This happens a lot. Military people can tell the difference between their own planes and enemy missiles just by looking. Radiologists can spot a stroke in a brain scan before it's obvious. Even hairdressers can tell if someone is pregnant just by touching their hair. Our brains are like prediction machines. They learn from experience and they start noticing things that help us make better decisions. But here's the thing, we don't always know what we're learning. We just know that something feels right or wrong. That's why habits are so powerful. They happen without us thinking about them. You don't have to tell your body to breathe or eat. It just does it automatically. And the same goes for habits we form in our lives. We don't always know why we do what we do, but our brains are working hard to make sure we stay safe and healthy. To understand our habits better, we need to start by noticing them. One way to do this is by using something called a habit scorecard. You list all your daily habits and then rate them as good, bad, or neutral. This helps you see what's helping you and what's holding you back. The key is to be aware. Once you notice your habits, you can start making changes. In 2001, some researchers in Britain did an interesting experiment with 248 people who wanted to build better exercise habits. They split the people into 3 groups. The first group just tracked how much they exercised. The second group read about why exercise is good for you and learned about heart health. The third group got the same info as the second group, but they also made a plan. They had to fill in a sentence like, "During the next week, I will partake in at least 20 minutes of vigorous exercise on day Y at time and place." The first 2 groups only had about 35 to 38% of people exercising at least once a week. But the third group had 91% exercising. That's more than double. The reason? They made a clear plan. Researchers call this an implementation intention. It's a way to say, when X happens, I will do Y. This helps your brain know exactly when and where to act. People often say things like, "I want to eat healthier," or "I want to be more productive," but they never say when or where. That's why it's hard to follow through. But if you make a plan, like "I will meditate for 1 minute at 7 a.m. in my kitchen," it becomes easier. One way to make this even simpler is by using habit stacking. This means you pair a new habit with something you already do every day. For example, after I pour my coffee, I will meditate for 1 minute. This makes it easier to remember and do. The song ends, the sun goes down. Now you have 2 lists. One list is for all the things you want to do. The other list is for all the things you already do every day. You can use these 2 lists to find the best way to add your new habit into your life. Habit stacking works best when the cue is very clear and easy to do. A lot of people pick cues that are too general. I did that too. When I wanted to start doing push-ups, I said, "When I take a break for lunch, I will do 10 push-ups." That sounded good, but it didn't work well. I didn't know when exactly to do the push-ups. Did I do them before lunch or after? Where did I do them? After a few days of not doing them, I changed my plan. I said, "When I close my laptop for lunch, I will do 10 push-ups next to my desk." That was much better. Goals like read more or eat better are good, but they don't tell you how or when to act. You need to be very specific. The more clear your plan, the more likely you are to do the habit. The first law of behavior change is to make it obvious. The song ends. The sun goes down. Now you have 2 lists. One list is for all the things you want to do. The other list is for all the things you already do every day. You can use these two lists to find the best way to add your new habit into your life. Habit stacking works best when the cue is very clear and easy to do. A lot of people pick cues that are too general. I did that too. When I wanted to start doing push-ups, I said, when I take a break for lunch, I will do 10 push-ups. That sounded good, but it didn't work well. I didn't know when exactly to do the push-ups. Did I do them before lunch or after? Where did I do them? After a few days of not doing them, I changed my plan. I said, when I close my laptop for lunch, I will do 10 push-ups next to my desk. That was much better. Goals like read more or eat better are good, but they don't tell you how or when to act. You need to be very specific. The more clear your plan, the more likely you are to do the habit. The first law of behavior change is to make it obvious. Now, let's talk about Anne Thorndike. She is a doctor at a big hospital in Boston. She had a crazy idea. She thought she could help people eat better without changing their willpower. She didn't even plan to talk to them. She and her team changed the way drinks were arranged in the cafeteria. At first, the soda was the only thing in the fridge near the cash register. They added water to every fridge and put baskets of bottled water near the food. The soda was still there, but now water was everywhere. Over 3 months, soda sales dropped by 11.4%. Water sales went up by 25.8%. The same happened with food. No one said a word. As this table shows, the cafeteria looked very different before and after the changes. People choose things not because of what they are, but because of where they are. If you see cookies on the counter, you'll eat them even if you weren't hungry. If the office table is full of snacks, you'll grab one. Your habits change depending on where you are and what's in front of you. Environment is like an invisible hand that shapes your behavior. Even though we are different, we all act in similar ways when the environment is the same. In church, people whisper. On a dark street, people act careful. The most common form of change is not from inside, but from the world around us. Every habit is connected to its environment. So, the same idea that worked in the cafeteria also works in your home. If you want to eat healthier, you probably walk into the supermarket and just grab whatever is there. But what if you tried a different store? You might find the healthy stuff easier to notice, and maybe even easier to choose. But not everyone can move house. So, what if you just rearrange your own space? Try making one room for work, one for relaxing, one for cooking. That's the idea of one space, one use. At first, I used my couch and kitchen table for work. But in the evening, it was hard to stop. Was the table for eating or for work? Was the couch for relaxing or for emails? Everything was mixed up. Then, I got a house with a real office. Suddenly, work was in one place, and life was in another. It was easier to switch off from work when I had a clear line between the two. The same thing happens with your phone. It can do so much, but that makes it hard to use for just one thing. You want to be productive, but your phone also makes you scroll through social media or play games. That's why it's better to assign each tool to one job. A writer I know uses his computer only for writing, his tablet only for reading, and his phone only for texting. This way, each space and each tool becomes a cue for a habit. Habits grow when the environment is clear and predictable. So, in 1971, during the Vietnam War, some congressmen visited soldiers and found out that a lot of them were using heroin. They were shocked. Then, scientists studied these soldiers and found something surprising. When they came back home, most of them didn't go back to using heroin. Only a small number got hooked again. This was a big deal because people thought addiction was something you couldn't get rid of. But the soldiers' lives had changed. They were no longer in the stressful, tempting environment of war. Without the triggers, their old habits faded away. This idea challenges what we used to believe about bad habits. People used to think that being weak-willed or not having enough self-control was the main reason for bad behavior. But research shows that people with good self-control aren't really different. They just avoid situations where they're tempted. They make their environment help them stay on track. The book explains that once a habit is formed in the brain, it stays there. Even if you don't use it for a while, it's still there. So, trying to resist temptation all the time isn't the best way. Instead, the key is to change your environment. If you want to stop a bad habit, make it harder to start. Remove the things that make you want to do it. So, the book goes on to talk about how our brains are wired to respond to certain things. It starts with a scientist named Nico Tinbergen in the 1940s. He studied birds like herring gulls and greylag geese. He noticed that baby birds would peck at a red spot on their parents' beak whenever they wanted food. He made fake beaks with red dots and the baby birds still pecked at them even though they weren't real. The bigger the red dot, the more they pecked. Tinbergen realized the birds were responding to an exaggerated version of something natural like a red spot. He called these exaggerated cues supernormal stimuli. He found the same thing with other animals, like the greylag goose, which would roll any round object back into the nest, even if it was a volleyball. This shows how our brains are wired to respond to certain patterns, and when those patterns are exaggerated, they become really strong. The book then connects this idea to humans. We're also drawn to exaggerated versions of things that used to be important for survival. For example, junk food is super tasty because it has a lot of sugar, salt, and fat, things our brains evolved to crave. But now, with food everywhere, those cravings can lead to overeating. The food industry uses this by making food more exciting, like making chips crispy or soda fizzy. They're trying to push our ancient instincts beyond what they were meant for. The book explains that this is part of the second law of behavior change: make it attractive. The more something feels good, the more we're likely to do it. And that's why things like social media, video games, and even junk food are so hard to resist. They're all made to be more exciting than the real world. So, the book gives an example of how TV networks like ABC used this idea. They told people to make popcorn, drink red wine, and watch their shows. Andrew Kubitz, who was in charge of scheduling for ABC, said they wanted to make Thursday nights special. They thought people would enjoy relaxing, drinking wine, and eating popcorn. So they linked watching their shows with these fun activities. Over time, people started to think of Thursday nights as time for fun and relaxation. If you always do these things together, your brain starts to connect them. The reward becomes part of the habit. You're more likely to do something if you get to do something you like at the same time. This is called temptation bundling. It's based on a psychology idea called Premack's principle. It says that if you do something you really want to do, it can help you do something you don't want to do. You can use this with habit stacking too. For example, after you do something you need to do, you can do something you want to do. This helps make the thing you need to do more appealing. So, the book gives an example of how TV networks like ABC used this idea. They told people to make popcorn, drink red wine, and watch their shows. Andrew Kubitz, who was in charge of scheduling for ABC, said they wanted to make Thursday nights special. They thought people would enjoy relaxing, drinking wine, and eating popcorn. So they linked watching their shows with these fun activities. Over time, people started to think of Thursday nights as time for fun and relaxation. If you always do these things together, your brain starts to connect them. The reward becomes part of the habit. You're more likely to do something if you get to do something you like at the same time. This is called temptation bundling. It's based on a psychology idea called Premack's principle. It says that if you do something you really want to do, it can help you do something you don't want to do. You can use this with habit stacking too. For example, after you do something you need to do, you can do something you want to do. This helps make the thing you need to do more appealing. In 1965, a Hungarian man named Laszlo Polgar wrote a series of strange letters to a woman named Clara. Laszlo was a firm believer in hard work. He completely rejected the idea of innate talent. He claimed that with deliberate practice and good habits, a child could become a genius in any field. His mantra was, "A genius is not born, but is educated and trained." Laszlo believed this so strongly that he wanted to test it with his own children. He was writing to Clara because he needed a wife willing to jump on board. Clara was a teacher and also believed that with proper instruction, anyone could advance their skills. Laszlo decided chess would be the field for the experiment. He planned to homeschool his children, fill their home with chess books and pictures, and have them play and compete constantly. The family would keep detailed records of every tournament they played in. Their lives would be dedicated to chess. Laszlo successfully courted Clara, and a few years later, they had 3 daughters, Susan, Sophia, and Judith. Susan started playing chess at 4 and defeated adults in 6 months. Sophia, the middle child, became a world champion at 14 and a grandmaster later. Judith, the youngest, was the best of all. By age 5, she could beat her father. At 12, she was the youngest in the top 100 players. At 15, she became the youngest grandmaster ever. For 27 years, she was the #1 ranked female player in the world. The Polgar sisters grew up in a culture that valued chess above all else. They were praised and rewarded for it. In their world, loving chess was normal. And as we are about to see, whatever habits are normal in your culture are among the most attractive behaviors you'll find. Laszlo and Clara raised their 3 daughters in a home full of chess. Every day the sisters practiced, studied, and played. Their culture loved chess, and that made it easy for them to keep going. People around them praised them for their skills, and they were proud of what they had achieved. Their success wasn't just because they were smart or hardworking, it was because their whole culture supported them. Everyone around them believed in chess, and that made it feel normal to love it and work hard at it. Now, James Clear is talking about how our habits are shaped by the people and culture we are part of. He says that when we change our habits, it's hard if it goes against what everyone else is doing. People don't like to stand out unless they have to. But when we change our habits in a way that fits in with the group, it feels natural and easy. We all want to be liked, respected, and admired. That's why we copy the habits of people we look up to. We want to be like the successful, the powerful, and the respected. We imitate others because we want to be seen as successful too. We do what others do because we want to fit in and be part of the group. That's why the Polgar sisters were able to keep playing chess for so long. Their culture valued it, and that made it feel like the right thing to do. Their success wasn't just about talent or effort, it was about being part of a group that believed in what they were doing. James Clear was in Turkey, staying in an old apartment near a busy street called Istiklal Caddesi. His guide, Mike, was from Maine and had been living in Turkey for 5 years. Mike was a friend who showed people around, even though he wasn't really a guide. That night, they had dinner with some Turkish friends. There were 7 people, and only James hadn't smoked cigarettes before. He asked one of the Turks how he started. The man said, "Friends? It always starts with your friends. One friend smokes, then you try it." Mike had quit smoking a few years earlier. He said he did it because of a book called Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking. The book helps people stop by changing how they think about smoking. It tells them they don't actually enjoy it and that they don't need to smoke to feel good or be social. The book makes smoking seem silly and unnecessary. James read the book and noticed how it redefines the reasons people smoke. It helps people realize they're not losing anything and are actually gaining a lot by quitting. The book makes smoking seem like a bad habit, not a good one. This is an example of the second law of behavior change: make it unattractive. James realized that cravings aren't just about what you want. They're about deeper needs like reducing stress, gaining approval, or feeling in control. Habits are modern ways to satisfy ancient desires. Once you understand what's really driving your habits, you can change them. James also talked about how changing the way you think about a habit can make it easier. For example, instead of saying, "I have to do this," say, "I get to do this." This small shift changes how you feel about the task. James started thinking about how habits work. He realized that when you want to change a habit, you need to make it unattractive. That means you have to think about why you're doing it in the first place. Sometimes people do bad things because they feel like they have to, or because they think they'll feel better if they do. But when you change the way you look at it, you can make the habit seem silly, or even bad. He talked about how habits are like solutions to old problems. Like, people smoke to feel calm or to fit in. But when you change your thinking, you can see that smoking doesn't actually help and that quitting can make you feel better. So, he started helping people by making the bad habits seem unattractive. He said you can do this by thinking about the good things you'll get from avoiding it. James also shared a trick called a motivation ritual. It's when you do something fun right before a hard habit. That makes the hard thing feel better because you're linking it to something you enjoy. He said this helps you start the habit with a positive feeling. He also talked about how to make good habits obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. And how to make bad habits invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying. So, here's a story about how one professor taught his students a lesson about habits. His name was Jerry Uelsman, and he was a film photography teacher at the University of Florida. On the first day of class, he split his students into two groups. One group was told they'd be graded on how many photos they made. The other group was told they'd be graded on how good their one photo was. At the end of the term, Jerry was surprised to find that the best photos came from the group that made a lot of photos. These students were busy taking pictures, trying different things, and learning from their mistakes. They kept practicing, and that helped them get better. The other group just talked about how to make the perfect photo, but didn't actually do much. They ended up with only one photo that wasn't very good. Jerry used this example to show how easy it is to get stuck trying to find the perfect way to change a habit. People often focus on planning and thinking instead of taking action. He said that action is what actually makes a difference. Planning is good, but it doesn't lead to results. If you just think about writing an article, that's not enough. You need to actually sit down and write it. The same goes for things like dieting or exercising. You can read about it all day, but you won't get results unless you do it. Jerry also talked about how people avoid failure by staying in motion instead of taking action. They like to feel like they're making progress without actually doing anything. That's why it's important to start with repetition, not perfection. You don't need to plan everything out. You just need to practice. Jerry talked about how people naturally choose the path that takes the least effort. He used an example from a book by Jared Diamond, an anthropologist. Diamond said that the shape of different continents affected how quickly agriculture spread. Europe and Asia are mostly east-west, so farmers could grow the same crops across the land. But the Americas and Africa are north-south, so the climate changed a lot as you moved up and down. This made it harder for farmers to spread their crops. Because of this, agriculture grew faster in Europe and Asia, which helped those places grow bigger populations and build stronger societies. Jerry said that humans are always looking for the easiest way to do things. We don't want to work hard, so we follow the law of least effort. For example, doing one push-up a day is easier than doing 100. That's why habits like scrolling on phones or watching TV are so common, they take almost no effort. But the real goal isn't the habit itself. It's the result, like feeling calm or getting fit. To make good habits stick, they need to be easy to start, even when we don't feel like it. He also gave examples of how to make things easier, like putting your gym clothes by the door so you don't have to think about it, or setting out your workout gear the night before. The idea is to reduce friction in your life so you can do the things that matter without wasting energy. Jerry talked about how we all look for the easiest way to do things. We don't want to work hard, so we follow the law of least effort. That means we choose the path that needs the least work. For example, doing 1 push-up a day is easier than doing 100. That's why habits like scrolling on phones or watching TV are so common. They take almost no effort. But the real goal isn't the habit itself. It's the result, like feeling calm or getting fit. To make good habits stick, they need to be easy to start, even when we don't feel like it. He also gave examples of how to make things easier. Like putting your gym clothes by the door so you don't have to think about it, or setting out your workout gear the night before. The idea is to reduce friction in your life so you can do the things that matter without wasting energy. These are simple ways to make the good habit the path of least resistance. You can also invert this principle and prime the environment to make bad behaviors difficult. If you find yourself watching too much television, for example, then unplug it after each use. Only plug it back in if you can say out loud the name of the show you want to watch. This setup creates just enough friction to prevent mindless viewing. James Clear talks about how we often struggle to start new habits because we try to do too much too soon. He introduces the 2-minute rule as a way to make starting easier. The idea is that when you begin a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do. This makes it simple and less intimidating. He gives examples like reading 1 page instead of a whole book, or meditating for 1 minute instead of an hour. These tiny actions are easy to do and help build the habit. Once you start, it's easier to keep going. The goal isn't just to do the habit for a short time, but to make it a regular part of your life. James uses stories to show how this works. He talks about Twyla Tharp, a famous dancer, who starts her day with a simple ritual of hailing a cab. This small action helps her stay on track with her routine. He also mentions how a few small choices each day can shape the rest of your day. He explains that there are moments in the day called decisive moments that decide the path you take. If you choose to work out instead of watching TV, you're setting yourself up for a better day. These choices matter a lot, even if they seem small. James also shows how you can break big goals into smaller steps. For example, if you want to run a marathon, you can start by putting on your running shoes. Then, you can build up from there. The key is to start with something that's easy and repeat it every day. He talks about how people often feel like the 2-minute rule is a trick, but it's not. It's a way to make habits stick. If you can do the first 2 minutes, you're more likely to keep going. It's about showing up and building consistency. He ends with examples of how to shape habits step by step. Whether it's becoming an early riser or starting to exercise, the process is the same. You start small, then build up over time. James talked about how sometimes it's not enough to just make good habits easy. He gave an example from the past with a famous writer named Victor Hugo. Hugo had a big deadline, but he kept putting things off. His publisher gave him a strict time limit, so he had to finish his book in 6 months. Hugo decided to make his bad habits hard. He locked away all his clothes so he couldn't go out and waste time. He stayed in his study and wrote every day. That helped him finish his book early. Hugo used what's called a commitment device. It's a way to control your future actions by making it harder to do bad things. James explained that a commitment device is a choice you make now that helps you stick to good habits later. He gave other examples, like buying small food packages to stop overeating or asking to be banned from gambling sites. He also mentioned a friend who used a timer to cut off internet at night so he could sleep. These small actions make it harder to give in to bad habits. Then James told a story about a businessman named John Henry Patterson. He had a store where people were stealing from him. He found a new invention called a cash register. It made it impossible to steal because it locked the money and receipts after each sale. His business turned around, and he started a company that became very successful. This showed how making bad habits impossible can change your life. James said the best way to stop a bad habit is to make it impractical to do. He gave examples of how technology can help automate good habits and stop bad ones. He also warned about the downsides of too much automation, like getting distracted by social media. But if you remove the easy ways to slip into bad habits, you can focus on doing meaningful work. In the late 1990s, a public health worker named Stephen Luby went from Omaha, Nebraska, to Karachi, Pakistan. Karachi was a huge city with over 9 million people. It was the economic heart of Pakistan, but also one of the worst places to live. People lived in slums with no clean water, no electricity, and no waste systems. The streets were dirty, and diseases spread quickly. Luby wanted to help the people there, so he started a study about hand washing. He and his team found that even though people knew hand washing was important, they didn't do it consistently. So they gave out free soap and encouraged people to wash their hands. The soap was nice to use, it smelled good and made hands feel clean. Soon, people started washing their hands more often. Over time, the health of kids in the area improved a lot. Diarrhea, pneumonia, and skin infections all dropped by big numbers. Even after 6 years, most families still washed their hands regularly. Luby realized that making a habit satisfying helps people keep doing it. If something feels good, we want to do it again. He used examples like chewing gum and toothpaste, which became popular because they felt good to use. The opposite happened when people didn't enjoy something, like the woman who stopped using a toothpaste she didn't like. Luby explained that our brains like instant rewards, not long-term ones. This is why we often give in to bad habits, even when we know they're harmful. The brain values what feels good now over what's better later. So the real rule is, what is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided. So here's the thing, most people know that waiting for good things is smarter. They want to be healthier, more productive, and happier. But when the moment comes, those big goals aren't the first thing on their mind. That's why it helps to make the habit feel good right away. You don't have to wait for the big results. You just need a little something that makes the habit feel worth it. The trick is to mix a little fun with your hard work. If you're doing something that's good for you but not fun, try adding something that makes you feel good when you're done. Like, if you're exercising, maybe treat yourself to a nice walk or a relaxing bath. Or if you're saving money, imagine what you'll buy with it. That makes the habit feel like a win, even if it's small. Sometimes, you have to make the habit feel like doing nothing is actually doing something. Like, if you're trying to eat less, you can save money instead. Every time you skip a meal or pass up a snack, you put money into a special account. It's like you're earning a reward for resisting temptation. That makes it satisfying and keeps you going. Eventually, the habit becomes part of who you are. You don't need rewards anymore because you enjoy being the kind of person who makes good choices. That's how habits stick. They start with a little joy, and then they become part of your life. So, in 1993, a small bank in Abbotsford, Canada, hired a young stockbroker named Trent Deersmid. He was just 23 and not expected to do much because Abbotsford wasn't a big city and he was new. But Deersmid had a simple habit that helped him succeed. Every morning, he started with 2 jars on his desk. One had 120 paper clips, the other was empty. As soon as he sat down, he made a sales call. After each call, he moved 1 paper clip from the full jar to the empty one. He kept doing this until all the clips were moved. In just 18 months, he was making over $5 million for his firm. By 24, he was earning a 6-figure salary. This method became known as the paper clip strategy. People started using similar ideas in their own lives. One woman moved a hairpin from one jar to another every time she wrote a page of her book. Another man used marbles to track his push-ups. These small visual signs of progress made the work feel satisfying and helped them keep going. Habit tracking is a powerful tool. It helps you remember to act, keeps you motivated, and feels good when you do. People like Benjamin Franklin and Jerry Seinfeld used it to stay consistent. Franklin tracked his virtues, and Seinfeld kept his joke-writing streak alive by not breaking the chain. Tracking can feel like a hassle, but it's worth it. It helps you stay honest, see your progress, and feel good about what you're doing. The key is to make it easy, maybe by automating it or only tracking your most important habits. And when you slip up, don't give up. Just get back on track as quickly as you can. So, the thing is, just because you can measure something doesn't mean it's the most important thing. That's what the book says. It's easy to get caught up in numbers and forget that there's more to progress than just what you can see on a chart or a scale. For example, if you're trying to lose weight, the number on the scale might not be changing, but you might feel stronger, sleep better, or have more energy. Those are real wins too. The key is not to let the number control your motivation. Instead, find other ways to measure your success. Maybe it's how you feel, or how much time you're spending on a task, or how many things you're getting done. The point is, tracking is a tool, not the whole story. It helps you feel good when you do something right, but it's not the only way to know you're moving forward. So, keep your habit tracker, but don't let it become your only focus. Stay flexible, stay focused, and keep going. Don't break the chain. Emotion, hopeful and determined. So, the book goes on to talk about how people can change their habits by making them painful or unsatisfying. It starts with Roger Fisher, who was a lawyer and worked with world leaders to prevent wars. He had an idea to stop leaders from starting nuclear wars by making it so they had to kill someone first. That way, they'd think about the real cost of their actions. But people thought that idea was too extreme and scary. The book then explains how pain can help us learn. If something hurts, we're more likely to change. Like a plumber who gets a bad review, or a chef who loses a customer. The point is, the faster we feel the cost of a mistake, the more likely we are to fix it. Then it talks about how we can use this idea to stop bad habits. One way is to create a habit contract. This is like a promise you make to yourself, with friends or people you trust, to help you stay on track. The idea is to make the cost of not doing something clear and immediate. The book gives an example of Brian Harris, a man who wanted to lose weight. He made a contract with his wife and trainer. If he didn't follow his diet, he had to pay money or dress up in funny clothes. The contract made him stay focused and motivated. So, the lesson is that making bad habits painful can help us break them. And having someone to hold us accountable can make a big difference. It's all about making the cost of not doing something clear and immediate. So, the book then talks about how talent isn't everything. It gives the example of two world-class athletes, Michael Phelps and Hicham El Guerrouj. Phelps is a swimmer, and he's really tall. El Guerrouj is a runner, and he's much shorter. But even though they're different in height, they both have the same inseam on their pants. That's because their bodies are built for their sports. Phelps has a long torso and short legs, which helps him swim. El Guerrouj has long legs and a short upper body, which helps him run. The book says that if Phelps tried to run, he'd probably do really badly because he's too heavy. And if El Guerrouj tried to swim, he'd also struggle because he's not built for the water. The point is that your natural abilities and body type help you in certain areas, but not in others. So, it's better to choose a field where your body and mind are already good at what they do. The book also says that while genes can give you an advantage, they can also be a disadvantage if you're not in the right environment. So, the key is to find a path where your natural strengths match the opportunities you have. That way, you can build better habits, feel more satisfied, and be more successful. So, the book goes on to talk about how we all feel alive when we're being our real selves. That's when we're not trying to please others or second-guessing ourselves. It's when we're just doing things we love and feel good about. The book says that when you feel like that, you're probably on the right path. But it also says that some of this is just luck. Like Michael Phelps and Hicham El Guerrouj, they were lucky to be born with bodies that worked well for their sports and to have the right environment to succeed. But what if you don't want to depend on luck? Then you have to make your own luck. Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, says that most people have a few areas where they can be in the top 25% with some effort. He says he's not the best at drawing or comedy, but he's better than most people at both. When you combine skills that aren't common, you stand out. That's how he made his success. So, if you can't be better than others, you can be different. Find a way to use your strengths and avoid your weaknesses. Like the author who made up his own major in college. He wasn't the smartest in physics or biology, but he created a new path that worked for him. In the end, the book says that your genes don't take away the need to work hard, they just help you know where to focus. Work on what comes easy, and you'll feel more satisfied. So, here's a story about a boy who wanted to be a comedian. He was just 10 years old when he walked into Disneyland and asked for a job. He got one selling guidebooks for 50 cents each. A year later, he moved to Disney's Magic Shop, where he learned tricks from older workers. He tried making jokes and doing short routines for visitors. He found out he loved performing, even if it wasn't magic. He started doing stand-up in small clubs in Los Angeles. The crowds were small, and his shows were short, sometimes just a few minutes. Most people didn't pay much attention. One night, he performed to an empty room. It wasn't easy, but he kept getting better. His shows grew longer over time, from 1 minute to 10 minutes. He kept experimenting, adjusting, and practicing. He even worked as a TV writer before landing spots on talk shows. By the 1970s, he was a regular on The Tonight Show and Saturday Night Live. He traveled across the country, doing shows in dozens of cities. His name is Steve Martin. His story shows how staying with a habit, even when it's hard, can lead to success. Martin faced fear every week, but he kept going. Scientists say that to stay motivated, you need to work on tasks that are just right, not too hard, not too easy. This is called the Goldilocks rule. When you're learning, keep things simple so you can stick with them. Once you're good, keep adding small challenges to stay interested. This helps you feel in the flow state where you're fully focused and enjoying what you're doing. But boredom is a big problem. If a habit becomes too routine, it stops being fun. That's why people switch from one habit to another. But the key is to keep working even when it's not exciting. You have to fall in love with boredom. That's what makes a professional different from an amateur. They show up even when they don't feel like it. And in the end, that's how you become great. Emotion, determined and hopeful. So, here's what happens next. James Clear talks about how habits are important, but they can also be tricky. Once a habit becomes automatic, it's easy to stop paying attention to small mistakes. You might start thinking you're getting better, but really, you're just repeating the same things. That's why you need more than just habits. You need deliberate practice too. Habits give you the foundation, but practice helps you improve. Think of it like learning to play basketball. You need to be able to dribble without thinking before you can work on more advanced skills. The same goes for anything you want to master. But here's the catch. If you don't keep checking in on your progress, you might start to settle. You might feel like you're doing well, but you're not actually growing. That's where reflection and review come in. They help you see where you're doing great and where you need to improve. It's like a mirror that helps you see the bigger picture instead of getting stuck on small details. James uses the example of the Los Angeles Lakers. Their coach, Pat Riley, made sure his players kept getting better every day. He created a system where players tracked their performance and aimed to improve by just 1% each game. This made them stay focused and keep working hard even when things got tough. Then there's the idea of identity. Your habits shape who you become, but if you're too attached to a certain identity, it can hold you back. You need to stay open to growth and not let one part of your life define you completely. That's how you keep moving forward and becoming better. You know how it feels when you're used to doing something every day, and then one day that thing is gone? That's what happened to me after I stopped playing baseball. I used to think of myself as an athlete. But when my career ended, I didn't know who I was anymore. It's like you're standing in a room and suddenly the walls are gone. You're lost. This isn't just for athletes. Military people, business owners, and others feel the same way when their main role changes. If you've always seen yourself as a soldier or a CEO, what happens when that role is over? You have to find a new way to see yourself. Instead of "I'm a great soldier," you can say "I'm a disciplined and reliable person." Instead of "I'm the CEO," you can say "I'm a builder and a creator." This way, your identity stays strong even when your job or role changes. It's like water that flows around rocks instead of breaking them. The Tao Te Ching says that being soft and flexible is the way of life. Being stiff and hard is the way of death. Habits are great, but they can also make us stuck in old ways. That's why it's important to check in on yourself and make sure your habits and beliefs are still working for you. So there's this old Greek story about a pile of coins. It goes like this: can one coin make someone rich? Probably not. But what if you keep adding coins? One by one. At some point, you have to admit that one coin can make someone rich. That's the Sorite's paradox. It's about how small things, when added up, can change everything. That's exactly what happens with habits. One tiny change might not seem like much. But if you keep making that change, over time, it adds up. Like grains of sand on a scale. At first you don't notice. But after a while, the scale tips. You start to feel like the habits are working for you instead of against you. James Clear talks about how people like Olympic athletes, artists, and doctors all use small, steady improvements to get to the top. Success isn't about one big change. It's about being better every day, little by little. So the secret is to never stop. Keep making your habits better. Keep trying new ways to make them easier, more fun, and more satisfying. There's no end to this. It's just a never-ending journey of getting better, one small step at a time. So that's the story of how small changes can make big differences. It's not about being perfect or doing everything all at once. It's about showing up every day, even when it's hard, and letting those tiny steps add up. That's how you build habits that last. Now, James Clear wants to say thanks. He's really glad you read his book. He's been writing for a long time, and he's happy to share his ideas with people like you. If you like this book, he thinks you might like some of his other writing too. He sends out a free newsletter every week with new articles, and he also shares his favorite books from other writers. You can sign up for all of that at jamesclear.com newsletter. So that's the story of how small changes can make big differences. It's not about being perfect or doing everything all at once. It's about showing up every day, even when it's hard, and letting those tiny steps add up. That's how you build habits that last. Now, James Clear wants to say thanks. He's really glad you read his book. He's been writing for a long time, and he's happy to share his ideas with people like you. If you liked this book, he thinks you might like some of his other writing too. He sends out a free newsletter every week with new articles, and he also shares his favorite books from other writers. You can sign up for all of that at jamesclear.com newsletter. In this book, I've talked about a 4-step model for how habits work: cue, craving, response, reward. This model helps us understand not just how to build habits, but also how our minds work. For example, when you see something, a cue, your brain creates a feeling, a craving, that makes you want to do something. Then you act, response, and after that, you feel a reward. This whole process is how we make decisions and form habits. James explains that happiness isn't about getting what you want, but about not wanting anything. When you don't have a craving, you're content. But cravings are always changing, so happiness is fleeting. Suffering comes when you want something but can't get it. And that same desire that causes suffering also pushes us to make progress. It's that wanting more that keeps us going. He also talks about how emotions drive our actions. We don't act just because we think something is good, but because we feel it is. And our satisfaction depends on how much we wanted something versus how much we actually liked it. If we wanted more than we liked, we'll always be unhappy. So, it's not just about what you do, but how you feel about it. And that's what makes habits stick. So, I've talked about how habits work and how they shape our lives. Now, I want to share how these ideas can help you run a business better. I've worked with big companies and new startups, and I've seen how small changes can make a big difference. Over the years, I've noticed that the same rules that help people build habits also help businesses grow. If you want to make better products, lead more effectively, or create a culture where people want to do their best work, it all starts with small, consistent actions. I've put together some of the best ideas from my talks into a bonus chapter. It's short, but it covers a lot. You can find it at adamachibits.com/business. I think you'll find it really helpful. It's not just about what you do, but how you feel about it, and that's what makes things stick. So, I've talked about how habits work and how they shape our lives. Now, I want to share how these ideas can help you run a business better. I've worked with big companies and new startups, and I've seen how small changes can make a big difference. Over the years, I've noticed that the same rules that help people build habits also help businesses grow. If you want to make better products, lead more effectively, or create a culture where people want to do their best work, it all starts with small, consistent actions. I've put together some of the best ideas from my talks into a bonus chapter. It's short, but it covers a lot. You can find it at adamachibits.com/business. I think you'll find it really helpful. It's not just about what you do, but how you feel about it, and that's what makes things stick. Now, I've also heard a lot of questions about how to use these ideas with kids. Parents often ask, how can I get my kids to do this stuff? The ideas in Atomic Habits are meant to work for everyone, including teenagers. But parenting has its own special challenges. So, I've made a bonus chapter just for parents. It's a quick guide on how to use these ideas to help your kids build better habits. You can download it at adamachibits.com/parenting. So, I want to take a moment to say thank you to all the people who helped make this book possible. Without them, this book wouldn't be here at all. First, I have to thank my wife, Christy. She was there for everything, helping me write, editing, giving me advice, and even being my emotional support when things got tough. She did it all, and I couldn't have done this without her. Then there's my family. My parents, grandparents, and siblings have always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. I especially want to thank my mom and dad for being my biggest fans. I also want to thank my assistant, Lindsay. She did so much more than I ever asked her to. She helped me with everything from research to writing, and I'm really grateful for her help. A lot of people influenced the ideas in this book. I want to mention Leo Babauta, Charles Duhigg, Nir Eyal, and B.J. Fogg. Their work helped shape what I wrote here. Thanks also to the editors and people who read early drafts. Their feedback made this book better. And to the team at Avery and Penguin Random House, especially Megan Newman, who helped me stay on track and create something I'm proud of. Finally, thank you to you. I know you're busy, but you took time out of your day to read this. That means a lot. So, what are the key lessons from this book? First, the most important thing is to focus on small, consistent actions instead of big, dramatic changes. Atomic habits are tiny, simple routines that add up over time. Like walking for 5 minutes every day instead of trying to run a marathon. These small steps create lasting change. Another key lesson is that habits are built through systems, not goals. You don't become successful by setting big goals, but by creating a system that you follow every day. It's about the process, not the outcome. Also, changing your habits means changing your identity. If you want to be a writer, act like a writer. Every time you write, you're proving to yourself that you are one. It's not about the result, it's about the routine. And don't forget the power of cues and rewards. Your brain learns from repetition. When you pair a cue with a reward, it becomes a habit. Like drinking coffee after waking up, or eating a donut after seeing a shop. Finally, start with what you already do. Use habit stacking to attach new habits to existing ones. Make your cues clear and easy. If you want to do push-ups, pick a specific time and place. That's how you build the habit. So, the message is simple: small actions, consistent effort, and a clear system will lead to big results. Start today,